Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful Friday. So we are very excited to introduce you our first part of the senior series, Launching Your Career in Uncertain Times. My name is Alejandra Garcia. I'm going to be the moderator for today. I also work at the UCLA Career Center. I'm one of the career engagement educators. I'm going to start off by introducing some of our services and upcoming events. And then we're going to get started with our panel and get to meet our amazing panelists. They're very excited to be with us today. So a couple housekeeping things, please. We do recommend that you join the meeting using your computer audio so you get the best sound experience. Also, we will be taking questions from students throughout the presentation. You are welcome to type your questions in the Q&A. We will do our best to address these questions towards the end of the panel. And please know that the session is being recorded and will be shared. Now, if you haven't already taken a moment to please fill out our attendance survey. This will only take you 10-15 seconds, and everyone that does complete the survey will be entered into a raffle to win one of 10 $25 Amazon gift cards. Take a moment to open that up. Okay, we're gonna move on. We'll also provide this link towards the end, and it'll be shared periodically throughout the panel presentation. Now, just a quick overview on the Career Center services, since we're aware that the students that are joining us today are our seniors or our recent alumni. So just know that we are offering all of our services virtually this term, including one-on-one career advising, our drop-in sessions that are Tuesdays through Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. There's also several events and workshops that we're offering, and it is the end of week 6. We still have many more programs that are coming up in the next few weeks, so please check those events out on Handshake if you haven't already. There are many opportunities to engage with employers and learn about different companies during this time as well. And there are additional articles and resources that you can download from our website at career.ucla.edu. I'm going to quickly highlight the other 2 parts of our senior series. Next Friday, we have our grad and professional school is now the best time to go. It's going to be at the same time. So it'll be next Friday, May 15th from 12 to 1:15 Pacific time. Followed by our 3rd part of this series, which is Stress and the Career Search in the Era of COVID-19. This will be a partnership with CAPS from UCLA. This will be week 8, Friday, May 22nd from 12 to 1:15. And lastly, I want to bring to your attention just one more program that's part of our senior series. These are our homeroom huddles. These are more of smaller group discussions where you get to build community with your peers and get any questions answered that have to do with your job search, with your career exploration, self-exploration, and so on. These are on Mondays every week this quarter from 3:30 to 4:30 Pacific time. Now I'm going to pass over the baton to my colleague Christian, who's going to tell us a little bit about their services.
Hi everyone, my name is Christian Chavez and I have the honor of serving as Associate Director for Alumni Career Engagement at the UCLA Alumni Association, a co-partner for this webinar. The Alumni Association works to bring you opportunities to connect with alumni to receive career advice, industry-specific insight, and even practical strategies to build your Bruin network. With 500,000 alumni, you have many opportunities to learn from UCLA graduates. Bruins hire Bruins and want to help. So with your degree, you are tapping into one of the largest alumni communities in the world. If you are graduating in June, the Alumni Association has professional development tools for you to access now and after graduation. As a Bruin, you have access to our online professional community, UCLA One. We encourage you to utilize it now to connect with alumni. There are regional, diversity, and affinity alumni groups to connect you to Bruins all over the globe. Lastly, the Alumni Association also produces a weekly podcast highlighting alumni stories called Bruin Success, so you can learn from alumni at any time of the day, no matter where you are. The Bruin Network is here to walk with you through your career. The experiences we'll share today from our esteemed panel represent only a few of our alumni stories, and we can't wait for you to embark on your Bruin story.
Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing this with all of our students that are here today. So we're going to go and go ahead and just jump right in. Let's meet our panelists, right? So we're gonna start off by having each one of our panelists share their name, degree, graduation year, current job title, and employer. I'm gonna go ahead and have you start us off, Vincent.
Hey everybody, my name is Vincent Phamvan. I was a transfer student to UCLA, graduating in 2009, communication studies major. And most recently, I was the chief marketing officer for a company called Simpler, which is a San Francisco-based tech startup.
Thank you, Vincent. Thuy?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thuy Huynh. I graduated in 2009 with a degree in political science and psychology. And I'm currently the Associate Director and Chief of Staff of the UCLA Community Programs Office.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Soleil?
Hi everyone, my name is Soleil Delgadillo, graduated in 2009 with a degree in sociology and then a minor in women's studies. I currently work at the Children's Institute, which is a nonprofit, and I serve as a volunteer and community engagement manager. I'm also the UCLA Latino Alumni President, also identify as first gen and Latina. Thank you.
Thank you, Soleil, for adding to the introduction. I think that's very helpful. Oscar?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oscar Echeverria. I graduated in 2009 with a political science degree. I was also a transfer student, first gen as well. My current employer is Revolution Financial Management. I'm an associate there, and I am the president of the UCLA San Fernando Valley Network.
Thank you, Oscar. And last but not least, Devna.
Hi everyone, my name is Devna Shukla. I graduated in 2009, also with a political science degree. Currently, I'm a business development manager at Microsoft, working on search, ads, and news deals for our business.
Thank you all for providing these brief introductions. Now we're going to have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about your current role and company and how have they been impacted by COVID-19. If you can also let us know how is your current employer handling vacant roles and if they are currently hiring. So I'm actually going to start with you, Devna.
Sure. So it's been a really interesting time at Microsoft, given the challenges of this time, but also the opportunities. Obviously, Microsoft is finding a lot of growth with things like Teams, a competitor to Zoom, our cloud business, helping different education systems around the world on board as kids are working at school. And so it's sort of hard to tell. On one hand, it'd be very easy to say that hiring has slowed down, but on the other hand, it's very evident based on your function and also the particular vertical of Microsoft that they're actually hiring now more than ever because of the need given the challenges with this virus.
Thank you, Devna. Oscar, can you tell us a little bit more about your current role and how it's being affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so a little similar to Devna, we've actually been extremely busy. We've transitioned to a Zoom platform. One of the biggest challenges we had is being in the financial sector, you have to sit down with people face to face. But now we don't have to, people don't have to sit in traffic anymore to come see us, or we don't have to sit in traffic to go see them. So we've been doing a lot more Zoom one-on-ones with families and individuals. And so we've actually seen a huge increase in the amount of people we can service and the amount of products that we can move, and just a great amount of growth. So.
Thank you for sharing. Soleil?
So working at my nonprofit, what we do is we provide free mental health therapy and free Head Start education for children affected by trauma. And we serve only in Los Angeles, so in underserved areas like Watts, South LA, Echo Park, Wilmington, and Long Beach. And so a lot of our work has shifted, and the need is, because we are serving a vulnerable population, the need has increased. A lot of our roles include fundraising, and so we're currently experiencing a lot of families who are not able to access resources like food or diapers, wipes. So we have been extremely busy just trying to find resources, and our mental health therapists have shifted to not telehealth, but to working over phone and working with families, and we have Head Start school sites, so we've also shifted to online learning, which has been a challenge because there is a barrier to getting internet for a lot of our families. So we're seeing it, seeing this all unfold. And then also in terms of vacant roles, so we are hiring actually. We're going to have a virtual fair coming up in I think a couple of more weeks, but I'll share that out when we do start hiring.
Thank you, Soleil. Thuy?
Hi, everyone. So I could talk a little bit about the Community Programs Office. We have a few maybe contract jobs that are going to be available probably after the COVID-19 stay-home orders are lifted. Unfortunately, a lot of UCLA jobs right now are on a temporary freeze, just given the uncertainty of the financial resources that the university is going to be having. And a little later in my talk, I can talk a little bit about getting a job at a university. That was kind of my first job after I graduated in the recession in 2009. I do think, once things stabilize a little after the next few months, you will see maybe universities reopening a lot of positions as they think about reopening their doors. And so currently there is a temporary freeze, and so the university isn't hiring at this time. But I do believe that in the next few months, you'll see a lot of contract jobs that are 1 to 2 years opening up, that a lot of, I would say a lot of college seniors should be on the lookout for. And again, just not at UCLA, but at the UC level, and also colleges across the country. And so I do think universities will be a great source for employment. However, there are going to be some drawbacks that we probably saw similar to 2009, including furloughs and potential layoffs and things like that. But again, there's a lot of diverse offices on the campus in academic and student affairs. A lot of these jobs are going to be on the front line in terms of response to university issues, and also our response to COVID-19 in the long term. And so I do think for students thinking about staying in education or tying your student experience to your first job, university life could be an option for a lot of you. And again, it doesn't have to be at your alma mater. It could be at a university close to where you'll be staying once you graduate from UCLA.
Thank you so much for that, Thuy. And so we're hearing so far from Devna and Oscar and Soleil that there's a lot of opportunities still available. And we're hearing from, in the higher ed perspective, not so much yet. We're going to hear it from Vincent next. But I did want to quickly point out this hiring freezes. There is a resource called Candor that you can all Google search, and that'll help you look at companies that are currently doing hiring freezes. So that's a great resource for you to look into. So Vincent, tell us a little bit more about your current role, how it's affected, and is your company currently hiring?
Yeah, like great question. Yeah, our company actually is currently hiring. So we work with hundreds of different companies across a lot of different industries. And I think the biggest thing that everybody should know right now is that there are some industries that are negatively impacted by coronavirus. There are others that are accelerating. I love your advice that you just gave about Candor. Another one, if you go to the UCLA Library website, there's a resource that's called IBIS World. That's IBIS World, all one word. And in there's actually industry reports, and they're putting out COVID-19 industry reports where you can actually tell by geography, by country, by industry, the exact industries that are positively and negatively impacted, as well as the percentage increase that that industry is either growing by or not growing by right now with coronavirus. And so this is such a time where, as you're focusing your job search, if you're just focusing on the industries that are accelerating right now, there absolutely are companies that are rapidly hiring. It's just about being really smart about the resources that you have at UCLA in order to be able to tap into that information and really target your job search. So I'm gonna throw a link to the IBIS World in the chat for everybody, but UCLA Library definitely has a subscription to it. So definitely check that out.
Thanks so much, Vincent. I actually just private messaged you to please share that link on the chat. So I'm glad you got ahead, and we'll do that. Thank you so much. All right, so we're hearing again, a lot of room where there is opportunity, some areas where there might be some freezes, maybe doing some research to seeing where are my options when we're feeling like we might not have as many. So thank you all for sharing your insights on your current experience. Now, we're going to take a little trip down memory lane. So looking back at your time in college, what were your career and professional goals? And let's go ahead and get started with Oscar.
It's a good question, Alejandra. So I was working at the time. For those of you who know the area, I was working at this place called Six Flags Magic Mountain. I was a supervisor over there, so I was a full-time employee, and I was a full-time student. So I was looking, once I graduated, to maybe go into law school. I was part of the pre-law society while at UCLA, but I didn't really have a set, goal in place. But I was working, and I think later on when Alejandra asked some of the questions, I think that's what helped me, just kind of put my head down and focus. But my goal was to finish school. Obviously, I wanted to get that out of the way and say I graduated. Now, what happens after? But at the time, I was working, and now that I look back, I was establishing an amazing foundation, which now has led me here. So probably not the best answer because I was working already at the time.
It's a perfect answer. We are all in different headspace. We have a different process. So thank you for sharing that. Soleil?
So in college, I actually applied with the goal of becoming a school counselor. And so that was my career path. So when I was a senior, I actually applied for grad school and ended up going to Cal State Long Beach to get a master's in school counseling. So that was totally my goal. I was also working during college as well, and volunteering. I volunteered with Project Bright, which works with incarcerated youth. So I was setting a platform to become a school counselor, but I am not a school counselor right now. So my own career path has pivoted so many different times, and I think we'll probably talk more about that a little bit later. But overall, I would say on a macro level, my professional goals really have included just working with people and making sure everyone has access to higher education, to financial resources. So most of my career has really focused on helping folks who are underserved.
Perfect. Thank you, Soleil. There's some common themes there, right? Okay, Thuy?
Yeah, so my career goals was, similar to Oscar. I thought I was going to go to law school. I thought, I'm generally, I've always been active in higher education. But, graduating from UCLA, I was a little burnt out by school. And so I was one of those people who thought I'd for sure take a couple of gap years. I thought I was going to go to law school within 3 years after I graduated. I never went to law school. And so I think after graduating and despite, the financial challenges that at least my generation was facing, I really feel like those few years that I took to work and get experience on the ground actually changed my trajectory greatly. And so, I never would have really thought that I would be, working at UCLA or looking more in the public sector in terms of public affairs and the political environment. And so, I don't regret my decision not to go to law school. Good luck to those who do decide to do that. I just feel like, I've always wanted to look at ways in terms of, changing policy, affecting change more locally and on the ground. And so those first few years out of college, I think really kind of gave me that strong footing. I also feel like, I was really involved and active as a student leader on the campus. And so at that time, I was the president of the Vietnamese Student Union. I was, an active participant in the Mother Organization Coalition. We were doing a lot of advocacy at UCLA and on the UC level during the recession time to save and protect a lot of the resources and services that we thought were essential on the campus. And so, luckily I was, had a lot of distractions from being worried about where my job placement was going to be. But a lot of those involvements ended up, leading me to my first job. I came back to the campus for about 10 months. And, right after that, I did a fellowship program called the Coral Fellowship program in public affairs in Los Angeles. And I really feel like that program helped me shift gears, learn a lot about different environments and sectors that I could, make a difference and change in. And so I was sort of glad that I didn't jump immediately into school in terms of like just opening up kind of my worldview and seeing what kind of jobs are out there and what kind of work I wanted to do long term. And so I feel like, you know, for students out there who are still kind of pinning down what they want to do in the next few years, I think fellowships, internships, a lot of those programs are very good at getting your foot in the door. You know, I worked for Senator Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General. The Quora program puts you through 6 different internship placements with senior level staff in all areas of, you know, Los Angeles and California. And so I really feel like, you know, I always said like I got good at starting that first day on the job. You know, we were shifting jobs every month. And so for students worried about what they're going to be doing, I would definitely say use this time to one, think about what you really want to do. Don't feel pressured into doing things because your friends are doing them, or going to school because that's what makes sense or at the time, right? And so I just feel like look into programs that one just helps you meet people. I feel like that was such a crucial part of my experience. And you know, I'm first gen, like a lot of the panelists here, and you know, as a student, I typically tended to be in the background, and you know, I didn't really like leading from the front. I felt like I was pretty shy, and so in terms of networking, things like that, I wasn't a traditional networker. I didn't like collecting business cards. I didn't know how to introduce myself, and I was often intimidated by that process. And so I would say, like, you know, I really spent those 2-3 years trying to, you know, talk to my mentors, talk to people I trusted, helping them and asking them to connect me to people that they knew in the fields that I wanted to be in. And so networking doesn't have to be the scary thing, right? I think if students, you know, I would definitely put it on your mentor's radar, like right now while you're applying or thinking about applying, that you're, you know, that you're looking for work. A lot of students, I think, make the mistake of reaching out months later, especially when they're in a pickle or or unemployed. And so I definitely think, like, once you start that search, incorporate your support network, let them participate and be invested in what you're doing. And oftentimes jobs might come to you instead of you looking for jobs. And so I really feel like I always thought I would kind of do some work in activism and advocacy. You know, I'm first generation. My parents were refugees from the Vietnam War. I knew that was something that was really important to me and shaped me. I wanted to continue doing community work and that type of advocacy. And at that time, I wasn't sure like the field of law would kind of afford me the flexibility and ability to make that kind of change. And so I always knew I would kind of be somewhere in politics, government, and the public sector. And I'm happy to say that I'm still doing that by working at a university on state level. So, but yeah, you know, my goals was always somewhere in public affairs and public service.
Thank you so much, Thuy, for sharing with us your insights, your experience, points of clarity, exploration. I think that's all helpful because this is the headspace that many of our students are in. Vincent?
Yeah, so when I was going through UCLA or coming into UCLA, I thought I was going to be a broadcast journalist. And, you know, it was really tough. In 2009, there were essentially no jobs available in the space that I wanted to go into. I see Soleil shaking her head up and down because you were right there with me, right? And I think that's how a lot of people are feeling right now too. And so I think the first thing that everybody should know is you're not alone. You're not alone. There's an entire UCLA community behind you and supporting you. And how you felt is exactly how many of us felt 10 years ago. You know, the next thing I heard Oscar say is talking about working at Six Flags. I also worked at a water park for a little bit. I worked at Best Buy. And, you know, when I was before UCLA, I was making $45,000 a year working at Best Buy as a supervisor, just like Oscar was at the water park. And after UCLA, I went back and I made $12.50 an hour. I made half as much. But here's the thing that I learned in that is, for those of you that are concerned about what other people are going to think about you, for those of you that are concerned about you, go back and think about the day that you were accepted to UCLA. Like, think about the emotion that you felt that day. You are the same person that day as you are right now. And you are not defined by your last job. You're not defined by your last job interview. You are defined by what made you great and what's going to make you great when you graduate from UCLA. And look at some of the other people on this panel. Everything's going to be okay. You're going to end up okay. This stuff takes time. And it's not saying that the next few years are going to be easy, because it's not. But honestly, these are the things that it took me 5 to 10 years later to realize that it was character building. And the things that I learned at UCLA and the grit and the perseverance that it gave me afterwards, being able to make it through that, being able to figure out how to pay off student loans, being able to figure out how to grab an executive role, a C-suite role in an awesome company, are the things that will end up making you better within 10 years from now as well. So, you know, to answer the question directly, I thought I was going to go to law school the day that I graduated from UCLA. I took Blueprint, I did all the things, I didn't end up doing it. But if I would have known 10 years later that I shouldn't have put as much pressure on myself to know exactly what I thought I was going to do that day, I would have saved myself a lot of sleepless nights. So, you know, you have career goals, it'll end up being okay. Don't feel like you have to know exactly what you're going to do today.
Thank you, Vincent. I'm processing because I'm feeling the chills of being a Bruin too. But I completely agree. And we're posing this question as a reminder. We still have to hear from Devna. We're posing this question as a reminder that your goals right now, whether you know what they are or not, you're going to be okay. And I'm so happy that you really emphasize that, Vincent. Okay, Devna.
Well, Vincent is certainly a tough act to follow, but I feel very similarly. I'm at the same desk where I was at, you know, so many years ago when I found out I got into UCLA. And so it's definitely a very humbling moment to see how fortunate we are to be part of this amazing community. You know, I was a poli-sci major. I was not going to law school. I knew that much, but I didn't really have very much else figured out. But I always just leaned into my passions. And my passion at UCLA and within poli-sci was American government. I took basically every class you could take with Tim Rowling in the Comm Studies department, who I still email and bug him all the time, just checking in and hearing how he's doing. And sort of sometimes life is also about the chips will sort of fall where they will. You know, I could have never told you when I was in high school applying to college that I would have gotten into or went to UCLA. It was a dream of mine. It's sort of the same thing. I applied to roles, you know, as I was graduating in broadcast journalism and also on Capitol Hill and also in communications. I knew I wanted to do something with communications and politics. And so sometimes life sort of happens to you, but you also have to, you know, show up and put in the hard work to open up those opportunities for yourself as well. I also spent a lot of time thinking about, and still do, you know, I'm very acutely aware of the sort of the pressure you will feel. I graduated from business school last year, fortunately, but both with UCLA and both with business school at NYU Stern, I graduated without a job. And it's really interesting when Vincent talks about the pressures that you might feel on yourself or for perhaps from family and friends about some people have their next step figured out. But I think it's important to also think about not only what do you want to be, but who do you want to be into the next phases of your life. To choose experiences, like Thuy mentioned, that serve your professional and personal growth, to make those connections as well. But it's really important, as Vincent said, that we are all in the same storm together with this global pandemic. We're just in different boats. And so it's important to recognize sort of what's in your boat and what are the pressures and stressors that you have, but also know that I've had 3 different jobs and 3 different careers since graduating from UCLA. And so, you know, it's important to think about who do you want to be and what sort of life do you want to have while you're also looking for the perfect role for you for this time.
Thank you, Devna. We're actually going to start with you this time. So for our next question, where did you land after graduation and what was the process like getting there?
Sure. So like I said, I graduated UCLA without, I think I got my job the day of graduation, day after graduation, but basically backtracking, which I sort of feel bad sharing this, I interned a lot during UCLA. So I did internships on Capitol Hill and also in broadcast journalism. And so I applied for a role in New York City with CNN's Anderson Cooper and became a production assistant for him a week later after graduation, which I would also like to say that I know that we all want a job and all want to have our next steps figured out, but there's something really important about taking time in between transitioning. So going from UCLA to a job is very different. Going from UCLA to a job in the global pandemic is also very different. And so while nothing feels like a vacation right now, I think it's important to also take that time. I'm a big believer, and you'd actually be surprised the number of people I still talk to now who have all these dreams and aspirations, but never apply to these jobs on job boards. I've always gotten jobs from the job board. I've always gotten jobs from applying and having a strong resume. I wish I had some sort of secret uncle who could connect me to different companies and all that, but I've never had that. And so I think it's really important to look at your resume, focus on the things you can control, the strength of your resume. Are you showing and highlighting your skills in the best way possible? Are you looking at a job board? Like, I'm sure Microsoft has a million jobs right now. Are you looking at roles that you could do today and that are also a little bit of a stretch as well? And are you tailoring your cover letter and your resume to those experiences? And are you applying to them online, and are you following up? You know, I think those are really, it sounds very basic, but I think you'd be super surprised the number of people who don't spend the time on crafting their story, working on mock interviews, and also being ready for opportunities that come together for roles. So I basically got this PA job, production assistant job with Anderson in New York, and moved from UCLA a week later and started my adventure in New York.
Thank you, Devna. Such a great tip, right? Know how to articulate your story. And so you have a lot of resources at the UCLA Career Center to help you with that. So do not leave us without a strong resume you feel really confident in. Okay, we're gonna go on to Soleil. Where did you land after graduation, and what was the process like getting there?
Sure. So like I mentioned, I actually went to grad school right after undergrad. But like many of my colleagues on here, finding a job while being in grad school was also very difficult. I think you got paid definitely a lot less than you thought you would, especially graduating from college. And even for grad school, my first job out, I was getting paid, I think, like $7.50 at a preschool. And so it's definitely not what I thought it would be like coming after, but it was difficult. I had mentors who I had interned for during my senior year at UCLA who were losing their jobs in the education sector. So they had been counselors for 5 to 10 years, and they got pink slipped. And so for someone like me who wanted to go into school counseling, there was no chance whatsoever. So I had to do whatever it took to get a job. And I actually ended up, I think in 2011, I had maybe 4 jobs. So I was going from one job to another job, and just looking at my tax returns, having to file 4 different jobs it's still kind of insane for me, but you have to pay the bills. I had grad school loans and I had undergrad loans that I need to pay back. And for me, I had to really go out there and network and figure out, like, where am I going to get a full-time position. And so I actually relied on my other peers who had positions and started asking, well, are there any openings? And so I ended up working at a motorcycle company, which is completely not in what I thought was going to happen and completely pivoted me in a different direction. But I would say it was probably one of the best decisions, because all the skills that I learned there, like marketing, networking, sales, it has all helped me in the career that I am in today. So I would not knock any position that you thought you're like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I do it? Do it. Say yes. Even if you have to move. And I know, for at least culturally, you know, my parents are traditional Mexican American parents. Like, they don't want me to leave. But I wish I had. Because I saw some of my other friends who went to lower cost of living areas in the US, and they were able to save a lot more money. So I'm still in Los Angeles, but I would say it's just a lot. I'm sure my other colleagues will have similar sentiments.
Thank you, Soleil. Thuy?
So I talked a little bit about my involvement as a student. And so one of the things that I did my senior year was run a referendum called the Pledge Referendum. And it was, you know, we brought together various areas of the campus in order to really preserve a lot of the student services that were going to be cut. You know, we're talking about during the 2009 recession, you saw whole departments on the campus just diminish overnight. And so, you know, myself and a lot of my peers at that time, that's what we were focused on as seniors, was how do we leave the university better off than, you know, than we got it. And so at that time we knew like the funding cuts were going to be pretty severe. And so we did what we could to try to at least minimize some of the cuts to at least student services like that, you know, places like the Career Center or a lot of areas that, you know, students would utilize during that time. And so as a result of, you know, participating on a campaign like that, I think working with campus partners, working with, you know, student affairs, working with a lot of people, I was able to, you know, not only cold call, I would say, or like do informal introductions, but to also work directly with administrators and staff. And so I think it really provided me with an in with a lot of, you know, mentors, a lot of supervisors. So, you know, Berkey Nelson, you know, he passed away a few years ago, who was a hallmark of UCLA, you know, an administrator there for about 45 years. You know, he was just such a great resource to me. You know, Dr. Rick Tuttle, some of you may know as a, you know, big Bruin alum and also an advocate just for students getting involved in public service. So he was the one that introduced me to Coro. And right after UCLA, you know, when I graduated, I worked at the community programs office. You know, I had a great relationship with the director, Antonio Sandoval. Also his predecessor, Tim Newbaney. You know, I was a CPO intern as a freshman. I had a hard time transitioning to a big institution like UCLA, and really was active all 4 years there. And, you know, a lot of my, you know, mentors and the staff there really encouraged me to come back and give back to students who were like me. And so not only was it, you know, a pretty secure job, you know, it was a $40,000 job. And I was able to get that job about 2 weeks after I graduated. And so my gap between school and my professional life wasn't very large. And so, and, you know, we actually were in that, you know, I did 1 year there. I didn't spend too much time, but we were able to launch the CPO Food Closet, you know, which now is the precursor to the food security and basic needs efforts across not just the UC, but across the nation. And so these ideas that, you know, I was a part of when I was really young and you know, just trying to give back to students really helped me to build a professional portfolio. You know, everything that you're doing in college isn't just, you know, for your resume, but like gain those practical skills running campaigns. You know, I was, you know, trying to get on this governor's race in Virginia once. And when I was interviewing for the process, you know, they weren't interested in my grades. They weren't interested in the classes I took. They were interested in the campaigns I ran. And they, you know, asked about, you know, there's fundraising involved. There's a lot of organizing involved. And so those things that you're doing in your senior year, I would really try to sit down and think about how you can market that kind of work into something you want to do full time. Those achievements outside of the classroom, I think, are very fundamental to separate yourself from the crowd that's going to be applying. You know, during the Great Recession, they said we lost about 8 million jobs. And in April alone, this past month, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is saying we already lost 20 million jobs. The largest unemployment rate being reported since 1939. And so I do think as the competition becomes more fierce, and I think the competition's gonna, you're gonna see the impact in the next few months as, you know, people are getting laid off or their furloughs are, you know, lasting a little bit longer. As young people, you know, who are now graduating from school, you have to think about, like, you're gonna be competing in a job market with people who have 10, 20 years experience on top of you. So I would sit down, think about what you're involved in. How can you shift some of those narratives to land yourself a job? You know, when I was an activist as a student, I don't think I was always I wasn't always the most pleasant student. You know, oftentimes I was feeling like, you know, I wanted to bang down the door and do a lot of advocacy. And my mentor, Dr. Tuttle, really pushed me to go back to some of those people and ask for letters of rec, ask for references. And I remember being at the time thinking, I'm not going to ask the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, who I just gave a hard time for 2 years, for a letter of rec. And he really told me, you know, like, at the end of the day, you know, administrators and staff are there to support all students despite, you know, a lot of your advocacy, and they understand the student's role, right? And so, you know, when I applied for Coro, like, I really focused on how can I get the best letters and how can I create the most robust portfolio to set myself apart from particularly a very saturated job market. And so I really think for those of you who are really involved in campus organizations, like tap into the alums that are in those programs. A lot of these projects and organizations have alumni dating way back, and students don't follow up with alums a lot. And I'm sure the Alumni Center and also the Career Center can be helpful in making some of those connections. But do send an email, right? Ask to talk on the phone, right? These conversations really do make the difference. And when I was young, I was like always so scared of talking on the phone. But every time I would reach out to somebody, a lot of these older staff members or administrators or just mentors would say, like, no one ever calls me, and they just want to be so helpful to young people and to students graduating. And so I would really just delve deep into your network, your connections, and try to and see where it goes. Like a lot of the panelists said, like you might not get what you want out of the first application process, or things like that. But at the same time, like that connect can come back around in the next few years when something opens up. Like students who come to me and ask me, like, what advice do you have for jobs in this particular profession? Even if at that time I don't have something so concrete, if I have a friend or an alum that comes to me and says, hey, we're looking for somebody great who would be interested in either interning with us or taking a job with us, like the fact that you emailed me even months ago or years ago, or a couple years before, it puts it in the back of my mind that you're a student looking in that area, right? And so I would definitely say, like, focus on communicating, reaching out, and reconnecting with a lot of your mentors and friends over the last 4 or 5 years. For freshman students and for transfers, the 2 or 3 years that you built, I would even go back to your community college. I think that connection that is often lost when you get into college can always come back around. And so. And again, people are always looking forward to hearing from you too and knowing where you're at in your process.
Thank you, Thuy. I really appreciate that. Being proactive and leveraging your network, right? These are really strong points. Okay, so let's hear from Vincent and from Oscar. So Vincent, tell us a little bit more about your process. I know we all got to share and hear a little bit about that. So any additional thoughts you want to add to this question?
Yeah, I did not land well after graduation. I think a lot of it comes down to, like, I needed to hear what Devna just said at the beginning of the session, because, I have immigrant parents and they're absolutely incredible and I learned a lot from them, but neither of them worked in corporate America. And when I take a look at my career over the first few years after UCLA, I had friends who did do well, that landed in roles that were close to 6-figure jobs that allowed them to be able to get 6-figure jobs within a few years. And then for me, it took me close to 5 years to be able to catch up to them. And it all came down to the differences that Devna called out a lot of it earlier. And I actually went back a few weeks ago and I started a podcast. It's called How I Got Here. And I invited somebody else from UCLA who I perceived at the time just killed it, absolutely killed it. Came out of UCLA and did stronger than ever. She's been at one company for the past 10 years and it's been incredible. So I'm going to share the link to that podcast, but if I had to sum it down into like the really actionable things, she did a much better job networking than me. She asked everybody that she knew. She did a much better job researching industries and companies that were actually actively hiring. So using that IBIS world to figure out what industries are doing well, not doing well, doing the Candor tool that Alejandra just mentioned to find those companies. And then after that, leveraging the best alumni network that you possibly have, jump onto UCLA One. Once you find those companies, just start reaching out to people who work at that company. You're gonna find an Oscar, you're gonna find a Soleil, you're gonna find a Devna that works there. And it's really hard as a UCLA alum to not answer questions and emails from other UCLA alum. It's the best club in the world. And so, that's why for me, like, I still have my UCLA email, it's on my photo on Zoom, I think. And so, when like a Thuy sees an email from a UCLA alum, you're going to try to do everything that you can to help. You can't guarantee that you're going to get the job, but you can at least guarantee that a recruiter's going to look at the resume, it's going to get considered, and you'll have the best shot that you possibly can. But those are the big things that I learned that were the difference between like what Chantel, who is a UC alum, did on, told her story about how she got a job after UCLA on the podcast, and what I didn't do, which didn't put me in a great position after I graduated.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and thank you for sharing the podcast. Oscar?
Yeah, so it's funny. The day at graduation, I think it was on a Saturday, I graduated in the morning out of poly, and then I went to work, and everyone was like, what are you doing? Don't you want to celebrate? And I was like, well, I kind of have to work today. I think to echo what everyone else was saying, I think I was reading some of the questions that some of the attendees were submitting, and they were saying, you know, what about starting your own business? And what if there's a position that you want, but it's not open right now? I think a lot of times people miss this part, and it's super important. It's experience, right? Even if you go and work at a grocery store right now that's hiring, right, you're going to get experience. Like Soleil was saying, you know, the customer service, the dealing with a group of people, dealing with great associates or co-employees or colleagues, whatever you want to call them. Because right now, what people are doing, they're trying to wait to see what opens. And something that Vincent said, the previous question is, there's so many businesses out there making so much money, and so many people making so much money, and they're looking for people. So in the meantime, what I tell people is get experience, because that's priceless, right? I spent 8 years at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and exactly like Vincent was saying, I was getting paid $13.80 and I had a UCLA degree. But the one thing that I look back now that I love and I cherish so much is the experience of building a team, the leading a team, of dealing with you know, upset bosses and supervisors, and how to lead other people, and how to deal with irate customers. And now I look back, and when there's a customer that's irate or someone's upset, I just go back to that experience of how I handled that when I was, you know, 20, 21, 22 working. So if there's a position that isn't open right now that you really like, that's okay. It's going to open later. But for now, you have to get that experience wherever it is, right? And don't miss out on that experience, even if it's working at a grocery store or like a theme park like Vincent and I were doing. Get that experience now so you get to build on that and continuously building on that. So.
Thank you so much, Oscar. I'm hearing a lot of take the opportunity, gain the experience. There's going to be a lot of transferable skills, right? Leverage your network, but really maximize that. We could do better. That's one thing that Vincent said. We could do better. We could do better. And so trying to keep that momentum going and leveraging your network here. So thank you very much for all of your insights. So we're almost done with our pre-prepared questions. We only have a couple more. These are going to be speed rounds. And then there's a few questions that we have on the Q&A from our attendees that we'll address soon after that. So for this speed round, I'm going to ask each one of you to please share one tip of advice that you have for students that are currently in the job search during an uncertain job market. So we'll start with you, Oscar.
So I typed it into the group chat, but I think there's a wonderful story about Abraham Lincoln, and he was looking for a general to lead the Civil War, and he kept on going through all these other bad generals until he found Ulysses S. Grant. And to me, that's just, you know, and I think Vincent said there's a grit and being persistent, right? If there's a job that it's not open right now, that's okay. It's going to open up later, but just don't stop, right? If that's something that you want, don't stop going after it, because eventually when it is open, you've worked on yourself enough for that job now to come to you. So that's my piece of advice for the speed round.
Thanks, Oscar. That was great. I timed you. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't time you. Soleil.
What advice would I give you all? I would say get out of your comfort zone. I was very shy during undergrad, but in grad school, or I think around like 2013, I started joining the Alumni Association and started going to networking events. And it was a weird experience for me from the start, because I was networking with folks who were doing well in their careers, and they were in the same cohort as us. And it was hard not to put myself down, because folks were doing well. They were talking about designer purses and the homes that they were buying. And so for me, especially being first gen and not coming from a privileged financial background, I would say for all of you who may find yourself in that situation is other folks have advantages that you may not have. So do not put yourself down. And do not compare yourself. I think, Vincent, you were talking about this. Don't compare yourself whatsoever, because I have some friends who were able to buy homes, but turns out their parents were able to help them with the down payment. I still don't have a house right now, and I still don't have a down payment. So it's okay. The other thing that I'd probably say is find a job that has retirement built into the compensation, and definitely negotiate. I know when I was getting my first jobs, I was so thankful to even have a job, but I didn't even realize I could negotiate. And I think when you're in that situation, you're like, thank you so much for this. But turns out a lot of my peers who were also getting jobs during that time were negotiating. So don't feel bad. Get that money. Yeah, and reach out to people, especially since I'm first gen. I didn't know how to search. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know how to do any of that. So it's okay to reach out to folks. There's LinkedIn, which didn't exist when we graduated. There's so many social media platforms, so reach out to us. We're here to help. The fact that you're even here is amazing. So that's a leg up already.
Thanks, Soleil. Devna.
So I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about mental health and also hustling, but also staying motivated. And I think it's sort of twofold. One is having grace. And so Thuy touched on this about having grace that the person at the other end that's receiving your email, you don't know what their situation is. They could be fighting for their job. Their spouse may have lost their job. They may have just had a baby. Like, you never know what's going on with someone else. So I'd say have grace that there are people at the other end of the line who want to help you, but are also going through the storm just like everybody else is. And I think it's important to I would also say tune out the noise. So focus on the things you can control. I know it's very easy to say, oh, well, there's a recession and it's a pandemic and maybe I shouldn't apply and I should just sit back. And I would say, don't listen to that. You have to basically prioritize your mental health and also know that you are certainly special, but you're not unique. So while I do, love my UCLA seniors right now, there are a ton of other seniors, a ton of other, business school, law school graduates, people who have just moved to different countries who are all in the same boat. And so I would say that it's important for you to focus on what is your career journey, what is your story, and what's your path, and don't let all the uncertainty of this time drown you. So prioritize your mental health, prioritize the resources you have in the alums, in the career office, in your own personal network, and just have faith in yourself and also take care of yourself too.
Thank you, Devna. Vincent?
I love the advice around the mental health. You can drive yourself nuts in a job search right now. Take the time to take care of yourself. All the things that you normally would have done. Go outside, walk, eat healthy, try to keep exercising if that's part of your normal routine. But the one really actionable thing, so we talked about finding industries, identifying the industries that are doing well, finding the companies, figuring out which companies are hiring using candor. Next step is start reaching out to other UCLA alum. And so whether you're using UCLA One, whether you're using LinkedIn, go onto LinkedIn and start finding people that you're connected with, and just reach out and just say, hey, Oscar, I see that you're at such and such company. Hey, Devna, I see that you're at Microsoft and that we both are Bruins. Your job looks really interesting. Can we just set up 10 minutes to be able to or just so I can learn about your job? I think people feel really awkward reaching out to people that they don't know, saying, hey, I saw that so-and-so is hiring this role at Microsoft. Devna, can you hook me up? That's really awkward to be able to ask for that favor. But if you just reach out and say, hey, Devna, I'd love to learn about kind of your journey and your career, more often than not, that's going to get you a conversation.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm hearing those informational interviews, right? It's going in for conversation, not asking for a job. So I think that's really great advice. And last but not least, Thuy.
Yeah, the last piece of advice I'll leave all of you with is try to, do your best with all the things that you can control. There's not a lot of good excuses for bad resumes or bad cover letters. And I'll be a person, my resume was not very good. I remember one of my mentors looked at it and was like, you cannot do this. And I remember when I was young, I was like, I'll let the work speak for itself, or let me get into the interview and I can show who I am. And I really think putting the time and effort into your paper materials is very key. Also, I think preparing for interviews and interview panels, I think some of the panelists talked a little bit about that. But if have a mentor, have a friend in a certain field, pick their brain about what people are generally looking for. They could give you stylistic tips, how to approach larger group sessions versus one-on-one, right? A lot of companies, there's like multiple levels for interviewing. So you might interview with like the staff before you interview with the hiring manager. And so this is all vetting. So I always tell students, the typos, the bad resumes, the bad cover letters, those are, those are a no-go, I think. I think paper cuts, I'm a person at UCLA, there's a job application portal, right? So you can actually go into a lot of these entities and just go down a list of jobs. But a lot of them, since they are like public job boards and things like that, you might get 400 to 500 applicants for one job. And that paper cut, getting past that paper cut is so crucial. So I always say, like, even if you think it's good to go, have that second set of eyes. Like I had a student who was applying for Salesforce, right? And I wasn't particularly connected to that company, but I had a lot of friends in business who were. And so I made the connect for the student to talk to people who might be able to look at the resume that they're looking for, right? And so I would definitely try to optimize like who you know and if you have people particularly in that industry and field, even though they're not connected to the company, they can be very helpful. I think interview prep, getting into the right mindset. And again, I think Devna was, approaching things with grace, I think is just so crucial. A lot of students that come to college, in my opinion, are just a little too confident. And again, if you're looking for entry-level jobs, I'm going to be looking for these other character traits, right? Like, are you a good team player? Are you somebody that's easy to work with? A lot of times hiring managers aren't selecting people based on just pure resume and accomplishments. They're looking for a good fit for the team, especially in a position that, again, might be longer, right? If you're going to work with somebody for 10 years, you're going to want to know what you're getting with that person. And so I always tell young people, like, go into the interview trying to be personable and again, not fake, trying to make a connection with whoever it is that's on that hiring committee, because you'll be surprised, like these little gentle things that like I've seen young people do in terms of like defining their character and what they care about and all that, oftentimes will supersede just pure skill. Because if you have all the skills, but all of your references say like you're just generally not easy to work with, that could be the deal breaker. And so I would definitely focus on grace and your approach and understanding that the hiring manager or that company could be under stress as well, especially given COVID. Everyone's really affected by it right now. And so it's not just young people graduating from the school. So like imagine that being your parent or your friend, and somebody approaching them with all of the ways to correct their company. I wouldn't go in with that approach. I would go in like really gentle, really trying to understand what that company does and what the purpose that drives that organization. Those are the things that you all, as young people can be preparing for, doing research on the company. I think there was a lot of questions about how do you find out who to address a cover letter to. This is where LinkedIn is really helpful. Again, it doesn't have to be the actual hiring manager, but it could be the boss of that company, right? Or the VP or whoever's in that, because a lot of companies have layers. And so you want to, know what division you're applying for. Don't talk about different division. And this is where doing your research, I think, could really put you ahead of the game. Like I know when somebody has taken the time to find out about what my organization does. And we're always looking for a good fit, right? And so whatever, that means, it's really hard to interpret that, but you'll get the feel for it too as you kind of go through the job search. And like similar to the other panelists, use these interviews as a learning experience. That first interview, that second interview, that even if you don't land the job, always walk away from those hiring committees asking for feedback. And again, not everybody offers it, but I think a lot of people generally do in terms of like, what could I have done differently? And those are appropriate questions to ask. That when I was your age, I was really afraid to do because I just wanted the job so bad. But I think just trying to ask those basic questions really do show your interest in the organization's mission.
Thank you, Thuy. And we're hearing, approach this with grace for yourself, right? And there are many things you don't have any control over, like what opportunities might actually be available and what companies are doing hiring freezes. We don't have control over those things, but how you prepare for the opportunities that are out there, how you present yourself on paper, in person, right? You definitely have control over that, and you have access to support with the UCLA Career Center, as I mentioned, one-on-one advising. And these resources are free for you right now, and you want to do this right now while it is free for you before you enter the world post-grad, and you might not have access to those support services. But if we have time at the end, I will go over our alumni services, because you all will have 3 months of full access. I guess I should just say this now. You all will have 3 months of full access to all the Career Center services. If you're a June candidate, it'll be through the end of summer. So you still have some time to polish your resume, practice interviewing, and develop those skills that you would need to help you enter your next position. So we have one more speed round question, and we do have a time to answer some of the questions in the Q&A. So just very quickly, let's make this one very, very fast so that we get to those remaining questions on the Q&A. What tips, and we've touched on mental health already, so this one will be really focused on resilience and that growth mindset, that approach to their search right now. So what tips do you have for being resilient during this time? Now start with you, Thuy. Oh, you're on mute, Thuy. There you go.
Sorry, I was reading some of these questions. Can you repeat the question really quick?
Yes, if you can share your tips for being resilient during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a question about, you know, hustling versus mental health. I think Devna kind of talked about it a little bit, but I just do think you got to keep on pushing. You know, a lot of you worked so hard to get to college already. You know, I'm not a person that thinks college is just a ticket to your first class job, right? And so I just think you have to kind of enter the job market with that same tenacity, that same push, that same hunger. Again, like you're in the next few months, you're going to have to start thinking about how you separate yourself from other candidates. And I think volunteering is going to be really critical. Being around people who, you know, think like you and are kind of ambitious in that same way is critical. I did a talk earlier in the week on, like, you know, if you can help it, you know, I know some of you've already moved home, but just try not to be home for a long period of time. You know, I was first gen, and, you know, my parents would have had me doing a laundry list of things as if I moved back. And a lot of times in my community, people don't really understand, like, that you have to work or do things for networking and such. So I always say, like, if students can, you know, have a short-term and a long-term plan to be in your own place, you know, be in a city that you want to work in. I also think be open-minded, you know, and in order to move up, sometimes you have to move out. I hear a lot of people limit a lot of their opportunities based on cities they want to live in. And again, like, especially for diversity, you know, if you come from a diverse background, a lot of organizations, you know, even in the Midwest or in the East Coast, are looking for people like you. And so I wouldn't limit yourself to being in these big cities like LA or New York. I do think you have to leverage whatever community you build in college, because that is going to be like the base for a lot of your connections. But I think, like, you know, being around other people who are going to be positive, working on studying for your exams, if you're going to be thinking about grad school or the job hunt with your friends, you know. Again, like, I think with COVID-19 right now, a lot of students are isolating themselves. Like, try to remain connected. Build yourself a community, right? A community that will promote you and encourage you, and also ultimately, hopefully, connect you to some job. And a lot of these industries, 90% of the battle is showing up. And once, you know, some of these stay-at-home orders are lifted, like, find a way to volunteer, find a way to meet somebody. It's going to be really hard to find a job from a computer. And so you're more likely to get an interview and to get selected if they have already met you in some capacity. Or you have a sponsor or somebody who will vouch for you, who that matters to them, right? And so I just think whatever field you're in, any industry, there's a lot of opportunities. Like, I would definitely just, you know, keep it pushing and keep hustling as much as you can. I just think, like, this is the time to put in the work in terms of having success long term.
Thank you, Thuy. We're going to jump over to Oscar.
So a few tips, and I know they talked a little bit about mental health, but for me, it's it's find something you love doing outside of school or work, right? So for me, I love reading. I try to read books all the time and different kinds of books. I've been trying to run more often. So one of my goals is once all this is done, I'm going to try to do like a 5K or a 10K. So I'm trying to get ready for that. And then I'm trying to swim a little bit more. Obviously, it's super hot out here in the valley. But a lot of times, we want to focus on work and we want to focus on our job and focus on school. But it's just, we're adding more and more into, something already that we're already stressed out about. So find a way to escape that, whether it's through music or yoga or drawing or writing. Find something that it's going to allow you to take a break from what you're currently doing. And then once you come back to whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, you're going to be able to focus. I know someone in the questions asked from last night in the Excel spreadsheet said, we don't want to, spend time doing other things that isn't getting us closer to the goal. Well, you don't know if yoga is getting closer to your goal. It might be, you're de-stressing your mind. So when you go back to apply for a job, you're in a better, mental space. So find something that you enjoy doing that isn't your norm, right? Like I said, either exercise or something else that's using another part of your brain. And then when you come back to that other thing, you're going to be able to be more focused and, be in a better, place.
Thank you, Oscar. Soleil?
So I'm reading all the comments on here, and I'll try to address some of them with examples. So one of you asked, if you have an undesirable job, and how do you communicate that to a future employer? I was working at a motorcycle company, and I was applying for the nonprofit industry as a counselor, and I had to communicate why that was valuable to the person who was hiring me, because they couldn't see the connection. So I had to say, hey, I've been in the business world and I know the youth that we serve in this organization, that skill set will be helpful in connecting them to future jobs. So sometimes when you don't have, it's not as visible, you have to think a little bit harder to communicate that to a future employer, even in your cover letter, because I've been on the hiring side, and when you read cover letters or even reading your resume, you want to see like, okay, how is this going to help me and how is this going to fix the problem? You just have to be to the point, and also think outside of the box, because sometimes when you're hiring, there's a lot going on. So that's how I would approach that situation. There's another question about, I'm applying. It's been like weeks. I haven't got any responses. That's very normal, and I would continue doing it. We live in such an instant type of world right now where it's like, oh, like, how come I haven't gotten a response in 24 hours? I sometimes like to call it like professional impatience. So you have to be patient because it's going to take a while and you just have to keep going. Even if it means getting a job that doesn't really fit in your career. Like I worked at Hallmark for a little bit and that fit nowhere in my career path, but it paid the bills. And depending on your financial situation, there's no shame in that whatsoever. I know some folks who are working in retail also felt like ashamed by it because other colleagues who are working in their careers. Don't feel shame about it. And other ways too is continue your education. UCLA shouldn't be the last part in your journey. I think UCLA Extension offers free courses for recent grads. I think it depends on the certain classes, but I went to community college after and I did a painting class, a swimming class, and I applied for financial aid for these colleges and I didn't have to pay for these classes. So you can still go to community college and continue to build your skill set. So I would take different opportunities to continue to grow, and that way you can put it on there. And to Oscar's point, volunteer. Because I wasn't growing in my career given the opportunity, being part of the UCLA Latino Alumni Association, I was able to learn how to work with folks, build out teams, how to manage. And those are things that in my professional career, I just didn't get an opportunity to. But as I was applying for other jobs, I was able to say, well, this is how I was able to learn this skill set. So those, yeah. And then I want to also say, move outside too. I have a friend that just moved to Idaho, and there's so many benefits. He gets free internet, free TV. It's weird. It's crazy. All the things that you don't get here in Los Angeles. I'm kind of jealous that he has all these free things.
Thank you, Soleil. And then we want to hear from also Devna and Vincent. What tips do you have for being resilient? I know you've already shared a little bit, so if you can just share it again or add to that, please.
Sure, I can grab it. I'm going to do some resilience and some answering some of the questions in the chat. I think the best thing is focus on skills. I mean, I've seen a lot in the chat about like, well, what if you don't have like the best job? What if you aren't doing something within your major? And I think that, again, I want to fully acknowledge this is not a vacation. That, you know, I don't believe that this is the time for me to learn a new language, because I'm just trying to do the best that I can in this environment. But I will say, you know, to Soleil's point about education, there are always different skills that you can refine or grow at every single job. I mean, literally, if you're working at any sort of retail or fast food or whatever the job is, whether you're babysitting and helping out a family member, there are skills that you can grow and work on within yourself to not only add to your toolbox of skills that you have, but also to give yourself a sense of purpose as well. You know, are there startups out there that are struggling that would, you know, use free interns? You know, as long as you can put on your resume, you say it's an internship, and if you can afford to do that for free or volunteer at the same time, you know, you guys have a lot of skills because you are just fresh from the classroom, know way more about different industry trends. Like for me, the number of times I hear about TikTok in a day is astounding. And also the fact that I could barely use it myself. I mean, if someone said like, hey, you know, I'll teach you how to use TikTok, or I'd love to show you about this new, you know, tech innovation I saw in your industry, it'd be super helpful, because you never want to be that person who's also, you know, outside of the gaps of your, you know, vertical and don't know what's going on too. I also want to acknowledge the international students in the chat. I unfortunately don't have great advice for you, but I want to acknowledge that it is a tricky situation to be in across the board. But I would say that I think it's important to look at your next step as no one's going to, you know, get the, I'm trying to say this in a very delicate way. You could get your dream job for sure after this, but it's never going to be the last job that you have. You're always going to want to grow and learn, whether it's the company or the field that you're in. So I think it's important to look at every opportunity in the short and long term on how can this add to your story, and how can you go into any opportunity leaving with not only making a better impact on that group and organization, whether it's volunteering, a startup, you know, a family business, but also think about how you can also get a skill from that to show that on your resume as well.
Thank you, Devna. And then last but not least, Vincent, before we jump into student Q&A.
It's not what anybody wants to hear, but failure is part of the process. I didn't get into UCLA the first time I applied because I had, I think, a 3-point-something GPA in high school. But the only way that you can really fail is if you give up. And giving up is really not an option. You know, when you take a look, J.K. Rowling submitted her manuscript 12 times before a publisher finally accepted Harry Potter. Thomas Edison made over 1,000 light bulbs before he actually had one that worked. Steve Jobs got fired from Apple before actually getting rehired at Apple and turning it into something incredible. So, you know, as an Asian American who didn't make it into UCLA the first time that I applied, and then worked in a retail role after I graduated from UCLA, I failed on all accounts. You know, eventually I was able to pay off my student loans. Eventually, you know, my wife and I, who I actually met at Poly Pavilion at a basketball game, you know, we got married. We have a beautiful, you know, almost 1-month-old baby. It all worked out. But, you know, if I would have thought about those points of failure at that time, you know, I would have said, oh, this is the end of the world. This is horrible. But, you know, those are the types of things that are part of the process. And the problem is those things are not public. People don't like to talk about the times that they failed. So when you read the news articles, when you read the stuff that's in Forbes, when you read the stuff that's you know, people write books about other people, oftentimes those are not included, but it doesn't mean that those places don't exist. It's just not what people post on social media, but that's going to be true for every single person who is successful. Is they're going to have those things that are part of their story and part of their journey. And it'll be part of your journey as you navigate the next 10 years towards your success as well.
Thank you, Vincent, and congratulations. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have several questions in the Q&A that are actually from our international students. Now, I'm not sure how much you all might be able to share, but we are getting questions here, and I want to make sure we provide them with some guidance and some insight too. So let's see here. Just gonna quickly scroll, or I think, oh, they're not there anymore. But any insight to share for students that are international students. I'm not sure if maybe you know about your employer, whether they're hiring international students who apply for CPT or who will be, sorry, applying for OPT. Any insight to share there?
I don't have any.
I would use the resources that Vincent shared, like Candor. I would do a lot of research. I mean, there's got to be, you know, whether it's you start your own list and your own research and you crowdsource that with your friends as well who are international students. Again, I really empathize with the international situation because I know even when my business school classmates who graduated a year ago, it's certainly very challenging. But I would say the best thing you can do is, you know, bring that up in conversation about, you know, to learn more about what a company's official stance is or isn't at this time. But to also think about how you might be able to, you know, band together and make more informed decisions too on where you're applying and sort of understand the expectations, you know, behind that application too.
Thank you, Devna. And I will also strongly encourage all of our international students who are still with us right now towards the end of this panel presentation to schedule an appointment with one of us one-on-one. We do have a close relationship with the Dashu Center. We will work closely with you one-on-one with your job search and help you with how we speak to employers and request those letters, how we might transfer our skills. And so we highly encourage you to meet with us. We do have appointments available. Go on Handshake and schedule a one-on-one appointment with us and we'll support you. So thank you for sharing those insights. Now there's a few other questions here. I think Soleil already addressed this a little bit. There was a question from, oh, and it just went away. So it was actually about if you're going into positions that are outside of your major, and you did talk about your experience working at the motorcycle company, and you were actually going into nonprofit. So we talked about transferable skills and highlighting your transferable skills on your resume. So that one's been addressed. We're gonna go ahead and look at some of these other ones here. How long is too long a gap year to have on your resume if you're constantly looking for jobs but don't get offers?
Right now,
anyone, yeah.
I think right now, something that everybody should know is that these are really odd times. Some of the most talented people that I know that I've ever worked with have jobs. And so in the past, you know, having large job gaps reflected poorly on candidates because of the long time of unemployment, I would say, and I've heard from employers this past week, a lot of them are giving people a pass this year. With that being said, though, you know, you can start a Shopify store, you can start a blog, you can start reaching out to companies and asking to work on projects. And there will be many companies who will end up saying, yeah, you know, we do have a project that we need help with. We'll pay you minimum wage while you work on that project. And that actually gives you the exact experience that you need to be able to jump into another job after that. So it's definitely things that you can do to kind of take destiny into your own control.
Thank you, Vincent. We're going to go on to next question. This one's about skills. So we are going to highlight transferable skills. What skills should we emphasize? There's a question here on, and this is more of a concern on our humanities and social science students who are going to highlight more of the soft skills. So what are some examples of skills you would recommend they should highlight on their resume? Anyone can go.
Yeah, so Alejandra, I kind of touched on this on another question, and I know Soleil brought this up too. To me, it all boils down to people, right? If you want to start your own business, if you want to go work for somewhere else, you're going to be part of a team. You're going to have a supervisor. You might not have external clients or sales, but you're going to be dealing with people. So the one thing I learned a lot at Six Flags Magic Mountain was people, right? I had 18, 19-year-old, people. Then I had 56-year-old people. Then I had bosses. I had customers and guests that were, coming in and out of our theme park. So now that I look back, it all boiled down to people, how you deal with people, how you interact with them. And when all this ends, all these jobs are going to start hiring people, right? Or new companies are going to come out of this, right? A lot of people say, well, I wish back in the day I could invest in, Amazon or Apple. And now people are like, well, I wish I would have invested in Zoom. I'm like, well, what are you missing out in right now that 5 months from now, 5 years from now, you're going to look back and say, I wish I would have done that. Well, what are you missing out on right now that the people, the network, the experience that you're missing out on right now that later on is going to be of service? So I think to me, it boils down to people and how you interact with people.
Okay, so highlighting their relationship building skills, communication skills, those kinds of skills will be really important to highlight. And quick plug for our career guide, the UCLA Career Center. If you go to our website, on our homepage, you'll see our career guide. You download that, and we actually have a list of action verbs that you can utilize to help you build out your bullet points. And these are actually organized by type of skill. So you'll see communication, organization, technical, leadership, management, analytical, and it'll give you a list of different ways you can communicate that on your resume. So all of your bullet points should start with those strong action verbs. And so want to make sure that we answer a couple more questions here, but Soleil, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, so I manage folks right now, and depending on the job that you're looking for, I would say being outside of your comfort zone. When I say that, the folks that I manage are a little bit younger and do not want to get on the phone, do not want to call. And honestly, if I were to hire folks, I would want folks who are like, yes, I will get on a phone call and do whatever needs to be done to get, you know, whatever result. Conflict, how do you deal with conflict? Even your own personality, like how do you respond to folks or get feedback? Those are all interpersonal skills that hiring managers want to see. Like, are you going to be easy to work with? And, you know, how efficient are you? And I think those are things to really think about as you use this time.
I love the advice that Oscar and Soleil gave. You know, the thing that I would add to it is your experience at UCLA. Like, I've looked at thousands of resumes at this point. You have the experiences at UCLA to be able to really stand out if you use the right action verbs, as well as if you quantify the results. Meaning that if you started a student organization and you grew that student organization from 20 people to 100 people, you should be showing that on your resume. If you ran a philanthropy event and you were able to raise $4,000 for a nonprofit, like, you got to put those numbers on your resume for exactly what you did there. And you know, that applies across regardless of what student organization you were in. But I can't believe how many resumes that I've seen where it reads like a job description and not like a resume. What I mean by that is a job description would say something like, provide good customer service skills to people at Six Flags Magic Mountain, versus a resume really needs to say, I was able to raise customer service results from 15% to 20% or something like that. Although 15 and 20 would both be horrible. So pretend I said 80 to 85.
Thank you. And that's great advice. That's the difference between a resume that communicates that you're a doer versus an achiever, right? Someone that's contributing, and you want to highlight those results. That's still a skill. Resume writing is a skill. And if you don't feel confident yet that you've developed that skill yet, like I said, please reach out to us. We are here to support you and help you translate all of your major contributions, because everything that we do has a result, whether it's a quantifiable result, something quantitative, or a qualitative result, right? In some industries, some lines of work, percentages might not be the way that we measure our success, right? Or our contribution. It might be some other form that we do that. So we want you to go out there and present your best self on paper. That's the first impression they'll have of you. So great tips on skills that you want to highlighting results. I think we might have time for maybe one or two more questions. There's one on here about, I applied for a lot of jobs. How do I follow up after I've applied?
So I think I was the one who started this discussion thread. So my intent with following up is sort of twofold. One is, if you applied to a job in the job board, is there, again, it's another action item on your end, which is, can you go back to your community, you know, your mentor, I call them your board of directors. So the people that are in the industry or might work for the company, and say, hey, I actually really like this job for X, Y, and Z reason, because of X, Y, and Z experience I've had as well. I want to share with you. If you come with me for, I applied to a job at Microsoft, you usually can't help because of the size of the company. But if you said I applied to this role in business development, I could then maybe see, okay, who's a hiring manager, and use my internal tools to look at. I think it's also important to, like I think as Soleil mentioned, like being professionally patient as well, or impatient at the same time, which is, stepping back. Don't go blanketing and adding everyone on LinkedIn from this company or that role, but really targeting your approach and knowing that people will and can talk to each other. So you send one email to me and you send another email to Microsoft Bruin as well. We might actually say like, oh, hey, this person email you. I think it's also important to check, this sounds very basic, check your email, check these job boards, the portals as well. Microsoft will often give you updates to your application, whether it's a rejection or next steps or a follow-up within their portal. And I don't know that every time it triggers an email. Just staying on top of your communication, answering emails promptly, and also knowing how different roles and different alums and different people in your network might be able to connect the gaps and the dots on what the process is like as well.
Does
Yeah,
anyone want to add? Yeah.
I
Thank
have
you.
an experience. I had at working at another nonprofit she called me and she called my coworker. She left us all voice messages. So we did talk to each other and we were chatting of, wow, she really wants this job. And so it almost didn't look great because she was kind of just, in a word, harassing us all on a daily basis. So that doesn't help your case. And then I would also probably have someone in your network who will give you honest advice about whether or not you fit for that job. Because in your eyes, you may be the perfect fit. You don't understand why this company isn't calling you back for hiring. But on the hiring side, we have to look at like who's on the team and what skill set you bring to the team. So yes, you may be good at A, but we already have so many people on the team who are good at A. We need someone who's good at B. So I would say a helpful part, if you do reach out to someone at that company, you can say, well, this is what I want to go into. I haven't gotten a call back, but I am more curious to know about what skill sets can I develop as a person. So communicating that you want to grow and learn and get into this field and kind of figure out like what is that missing piece that you need to achieve.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we are out of time for questions, but I did bring up our pictures again so that students who are still on will connect with us on LinkedIn. And just a very quick reminder to please fill out the attendance survey. It will only take you 10 to 15 seconds to complete, and you'll all be entered into a raffle to win one of 10 $25 Amazon gift cards. That's it on our end. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We are so happy that you decided to plug in on a Friday. We know it's the end of week 6 and that you probably are burnt out from midterms and maybe even preparing for another week of midterms. So please take care of yourselves. Check in with us at the Career Center, and you've heard from our panelists. Reach out to your network. People want to help you. And so that's where we're at. Thank you.